بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وأعز المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين سيما بقية الله روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء. قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وكذلك جعلناكم أمة وسطا لتكونوا شهداء على الناس ويكون الرسول عليكم شهيدا. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Mu'minina mu'minat, brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jumu'ah Mubarakah upon everyone. Condolences on the martyrdom anniversary of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, Zainul Abidin wa Sayyidus Sajidina alayhi salam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the opportunity to study the life of this Imam, his words and examples of or lessons from his life and examples of his interaction with his community and with the affairs of his time, and learn through that to put it into practice, inshallah. Especially as we finish the first section of the month of Muharram, remembering Imam Hussein alayhi salam, his father, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. It is amazing. This is the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for sure. Everything has wisdom in it. That the anniversary of the martyrdom of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam comes shortly after the day of Ashura and the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So we remember him in the same month as we remember his father, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, as he himself continued to remember the calamities that came upon the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam from the day of Ashura onwards, in fact. And he himself states that the most difficult part was in fact Ash-Sham, not even the day of Ashura or Karbala, rather the humiliation and the treatment that they received in the city of Sham. As he answered when somebody asked him what was the most difficult part, he said, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham. The Imam salawatullah wa salamu alayhi lived after the day of Ashura, and we are still in the era after the day of Ashura, before the return of the Imam of our time, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. The era is the same in the sense that we do not have an Imam who rose with the sword and fought against any of the oppressors or tyrants of his time, though other schools of thought believe that their leaders, in fact, our Zaydi brothers, they believe that a leader has to carry the sword and fight. The Imams of Ahlul Bayt salawatullah wa salamu alayhim ajma'een, they taught us that it's not necessarily that they have to rise and fight to be an Imam, rather they have to complete their duty of guiding the people. Guidance is the key. The prophets were there to guide people. So many prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not fight the oppressors of their time. Nabiullah Musa ala nabina wa alayhi salam was definitely in the leadership or imam of his ummah, yet he was not meant to fight Fir'aun. Rather, he actually took his people and Bani Israel to flee, to run away from Fir'aun, and they faced the water and so on. So fighting the oppressor or the dictator of the time is not necessarily the way of the Imams or the divine guides. It depends on the circumstances, because their number one position and their number one responsibility is to guide the people. Hudat, they are al-hadina ba'd al-hadin, as we recite in Dua and Nudba. They are the guides, they are the divine guides. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes sure that in every given time, in every era, there is a guide, there is a hujjah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of God, upon the people. And Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam is a perfect example. Interestingly, our Zaydi brothers, they consider him as an Imam, yet there is a comment there about him not fighting the oppressors of his time. Rather, it was his, children, or his children, who some of them rose against the tyrants and oppressors, and they were martyred. Zayd, who was martyred, salamullah alayh, not to say that he did not do the right thing by rising and fighting the oppressors of his time. Nonetheless, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt set a very important example for us, or a very important lesson, and that is the fact that we need to make sure we guide to God. Ud'u ila sabili rabbika. We need to be inviting to God, guiding to God, guiding to the Prophet, who is the number one guide to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, guiding to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Even during the occultation of our Imam, what is our number one responsibility? To guide the people. Somebody asked me, basically someone who lives in the States, messaged and asked, what is our responsibility during this time, during the ghaiba of the Imam, living in this part of the world? What's our responsibility? What should we do to prepare for the Imam of the time? The simple answer I gave is, one, purify ourselves; two, guide people, help people, invite people. As the Imam Sadiq alayhi salam declares, he says, "In ishta thamma tad'u ilayna." When you're living there, do you invite to us? Inviting not only to come to every single person you meet and say, come and follow Imam Mahdi ajalallah ta'ala farajahu al-sharif. That's not necessarily the way you invite people. The number one thing we need to do is to make sure we're good examples. We ourselves are good examples, so that people look at us and say, look at these people, they have something special. Make them curious to ask you, what school of thought do you belong to? Where do you come from? Why are you the way you are? The amazing ethics and morals that you display, where did you learn it from? Let the people comment on that. Let your action speak louder than your words. This is how we should be in terms of following the Ahlul Bayt salawatullah wa salamu alayhim ajma'een. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, as we are remembering him, he set a perfect example for us. It came after the event of Ashura. He did not carry the sword and start fighting the tyrants and oppressors. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want every one of them to be killed and every single good person to fight, the evil, and even if that's going to cost him his life. That's not what is intended. If guiding to God, it requires rising like it did at the time of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the Imam rose against the oppressor and the tyrant, and what happened in the day of Ashura on the land of Karbala. But if it requires raising awareness as the Imam did, then that's what they would do, and that's what we should do. We're still living in the same time or same era, the time of raising awareness, taw'iyah, and basically educating ourselves and educating our community and educating the society to be ready for the Imam, to be ready for divine justice to be implemented on earth. And that's what the Imam salawatullah wa salamu alayhi taught us. Now, a few lessons perhaps from the life of the Imam, or methods through which the Imam implemented that the goal of guiding the people and inviting the people. The Imam salawatullah wa salamu alayhi taught us that there are no limits to how you can invite people to God. This is one thing about Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam we can actually reflect on and put into our lives. There is no limit. When he was a prisoner, he was a captive, a prisoner, limited to what he could say or do. Even then, he did what he could and spoke to the people, reminding the people, each at their level. When he spoke to an elderly man in Sham, he says, "Did you read the Quran? Have you read the Quran?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Have you read in the Quran the ayat?" He starts stating the ayat about qurba, the relatives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, "Yes, I have read those." He said, "Nahnu al-qurba." We are the relatives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Though the Imams of Ahlul Bayt taught us and emphasized that it is not about blood relationship, but at the level of this man, that he was deceived by the cursed Muawiyah and now his son Yazid la'natullah alayhima, that they are telling the people, we have an authority because what? They are telling the people, we are related to the Prophet. Muawiyah la'natullah alayh used that method against the innocent people, that we are related to the Prophet. We are from Hijaz, we are from the same tribe as from Quraysh, the same tribe as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Therefore, you people of Sham should listen to us, obey us. We are the closest to the Prophet. This is what he was using. So the Imam is telling him, do you know the Qurba? Muawiyah la'natullah alayhi can never claim that he is amongst the Qurba, but we are from the Qurba. The same relatives Quran speaks about, we are these qurba that Quran is speaking about. He speaks at his level, despite again being in chains, in shackles, as a prisoner brought to Sham, brought to the cursed Yazid la'natullah alayh. To Yazid himself, the Imam has a different way, a different method. Okay, he says, Yazid, in his gathering, he asks him, he says, what would you say the Prophet would say if he saw you bringing his family and children in chains? Ara'ayta ya Yazid. He says, do you consider the situation that the Prophet is now here? You're claiming to be leading under the pretense of Islam and related to the Prophet and Khalifa of the Prophet and all of that. Now a question for you. What would the Prophet say if he saw us as his family in the situation that we're in? This is during the time that the Imam was a prisoner, yet he spoke and guided to the best of his ability. The Imam at another stage of his life was no longer a prisoner, but he was banned from giving any kind of lessons, any kind of basically having classes and having students and teaching. His classes were banned. He was not able to do public speaking and so on. So how did he pass on the message? The next method was his supplications, his du'as. Now you go into his supplications, the du'as, the invocations and supplications that the Imam salawatullah wa salamu alayhi taught us, and you'll find that they are treasures filled with all of the principles, not only the practical principles or the akhlaqi, ethical and moral principles, but also the core of the religion and the principles of faith. All of that the Imam puts in what we call the form or the qalib of dua, in the form of dua and supplication, and presents it to the people. We have du'as from the Imam, and I urge mu'mineen and mu'minat to recite those du'as. We have daily du'as. We have du'as for every day of the week. We have du'as from the Imam for different occasions and events in the month of Ramadan, in Eid al-Adha, and so on. We have so many supplications of the Imam. We have a book known as As-Sahif As-Sajjadiyya that we should be reading and reflecting on and learning from the gems and the treasures of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. That's how he passed on the message and how he guided the people. In every time he tried his best and did whatever he could to guide the people. One last method I want to share with mu'mineen and mu'minat, which was unique in the life of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. Again, we said that he was unable to teach and hold classes. So what he did, he actually used to, the Imams were wealthy, they were gifted, they were wealthy. He used to go, and at a time where slavery was very common, they were bringing prisoners and bringing them as slaves and selling them. The Imam would go to the market where they sold these people. He bought these people, he brought them, educated them, taught them, he made them scholars, not just bring them to use them and abuse them in most cases. The Imam, rather, he brought them, educated them, made them highly learned scholars, gave them skills, and then he would ask them to go. He would basically send them. He would obviously free them and send them across the world. Go back to your town, go back to your country, go back to your land, to your people, to the people who you can speak their language, and invite people towards God and towards goodness and towards the school of Ahlul Bayt salawatullah wa salamu alayhim ajma'in. This was in fact one of the common methods of the Imam. They would not allow him to hold classes, but they could not stop him from buying slaves. They were not stopping him from doing that. So he did, and he used those people. Even though most of these people, if you read the history and you read some of the examples, whenever the Imam would ask them to, now you're free, you can go, I've taught you, I've given you all the ammunition necessary to teach and educate and guide. When he's sending these people, they were always in tears asking him if they could spend more time with him. The Imam knew when is the best time for them to go and travel and guide, yet basically his company was so beautiful for them that they preferred to be in the position of a slave than a free person. Yet if that meant to be with him and near him, spending more time with the Imam salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the opportunity to guide to him and guide to his messenger and to the family of his messenger in all states, in all situations, in all positions that we have in life. We ask him to make us amongst those who listen to what's said and follow. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وأعز المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد المصطفى وعلى علي المرتضى وفاطمة الزهراء وخديجة الكبرى والحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء وعلي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي التقي وعلي بن محمد النقي والحسن بن علي العسكري والحجة القائم المهدي الإمام المنتظر صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. اللهم وال من والاهم وعاد من عاداهم وانصر من نصرهم واخذل من خذلهم والعن من ظلمهم. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. تابع اللهم بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير. عباد الله اتقوا الله وتزودوا فإن خير الزاد التقوى واتقوا الله لعلكم تفلحون. Dear mu'mineen and mu'minat, brothers and sisters, once again, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jumu'ah Mubarakah upon everyone. Once again, we offer our condolences to the Imam of our time and to the mu'mineen and mu'minat on the martyrdom anniversary of Imam Zainul Abidin wa Sayyid al-Sajidina alayhi salam. In the first sermon, we spoke about the role of the Imam in guiding the people and some of the methods through which he guided the people. And one of them we shared was his supplications, his du'as, that the Imam taught and guided through his supplications. He was unable to speak directly, he was banned from speaking and giving lectures and sermons, yet he would supplicate and offer his supplications through which he was teaching and educating. One of the treasures that we have from the Imam salawatullah wa salamu alayhi is a dua known as dua makarim al-akhlaq. I want to urge mu'mineen and mu'minat, if we are followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt, if we are, as some of us may call themselves and label themselves as Shia of Ahlul Bayt, if that's who we are and what we are, then we should at least know some of the works and the words of Ahlul Bayt salawatullah wa salamu alayhim ajma'een, to follow them, because a Shia means to follow. And if we are Shia of Ahlul Bayt, we need to follow Ahlul Bayt. Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam teaches us, he has this gem known as Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, through which he describes the highest levels of morality. How can you be at the highest level of akhlaq? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes his messenger to be at the highest level of akhlaq. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. His messenger Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that I was sent as a messenger. My role was to complete and perfect the levels of akhlaq. إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, to complete and perfect those high level of honorable akhlaq and basically being ethical and moral individuals. This was the purpose of his risalah, he declares. Yet, as followers of the Prophet and his progeny, we should ask ourselves, and every one of us, and I remind myself before I speak to any of the mu'mineen and mu'minat, we should ask ourselves, what have we done personally with regards to the highest level of akhlaq that the Imams taught us? Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam put a supplication in that name, under that title, and the Prophet was sent for. The Prophet says, I am sent to complete this. Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam presents it in a supplication. What have we done to learn those and put them into practice? It is very sad, and I bring this up again and again, mu'mineen and mu'minat, perhaps reminders are good for the believers. That's what Quran tells us. الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين. It benefits the believers, reminders. I want to remind us again and again, in an age that many people are getting some information, I would not call it knowledge, getting their information and misinformation from what they call I call anti-social media. They think that this is where you get your knowledge from. Not saying that you cannot get some good information there. Some may share some parts of lectures, parts of perhaps books, hadith and so on, but at the same time there's a lot of misinformation, fabrications, and at the same time there's no organized method of learning. Learning and education requires an organized method. Why do we go to doctors who have certificates and they work in hospitals and they have some, some sort of license and so on? Why don't we go to anyone who opens a medical book and does some research and some reading? I guess some people now are doing that. They share medical information and it's like facts now. We have doctors because we know that organized methods of learning and structured methods of learning is what produces people who would have less error in their information, in the knowledge that they have, and therefore their verdict would be less erroneous. That is our concern. The same thing applies to our religion. Now, in terms of akhlaq, we have the most beautiful dua known as dua makarim al-akhlaq. How many of us have read this dua, reflected on it, on the meanings of it, and tried to implement level by level the teachings of the Imam in this dua? Question for us. If we have not, then before we start saying we are Shia of Ahlul Bayt, we have to think twice. And this is why Imam Rida alayhi salam said to some people who claim to be his Shia, said this is a big claim, or they were saying that they are the Shia of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He said this is a lie that you are saying. You could say you love Imam Ali alayhi salam. You could say you love Imam Hussein alayhi salam. You love Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, but you're a follower of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. How? If you are a follower of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, do you know his words, his teachings? Have you implemented that? Are you really following that, or are we just making a false claim? If we're a follower of Imam Ali alayhi salam, Shi'atu Ali, have we read Nahj al-Balagha, for example? Nahj al-Balagha is not all the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam, by the way. It's what Sharif al-Radi radwanullah ta'ala alayhi compiled in this book. Not all the sermons, some sermons and some parts of the sermons. Have you at least read this book compiled by a great scholar of his time and a person who was a muhaddith at the level of narrating hadith? His brother, in fact, was a jurist, Sharif al-Murtada. Nonetheless, he put together something that is considerably authentic, on a level of authenticity, very high level of authenticity, a book of the sermons and the letters and the words of wisdom of Imam Amir al-Mu'minin salawatullah wa salam alayhi. Which parts of that have we read, or have we read the book? Have we tried to implement the book of Imam Ali alayhi salam? Or do we start sharing messages? I often receive on different platforms messages saying Imam Ali alayhi salam said, قال Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And a lot of the things that I receive are a load of nonsense that they fabricate and say that it is from Imam Ali alayhi salam. I have seen some that have nothing to do with the Imam, just a statement of somebody who attached, I don't know if they were trying to do something good, they thought this is a nice statement, we'll add the name of Imam Ali alayhi salam, for a good reason, for a bad reason, whatever their intention is, it's between them and God. Nonetheless, there's a lot of nonsense, and we have a good book there that we could read if we read a page a day and reflect on that page. A page a day. That's all. Or in Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, the Imam has several sections, each ending with salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. If we can read a section a day, in less than a month you'll finish the dua. And each section, reading it would not take you any more than 30 seconds. Reflecting on it, maybe you can reflect for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Read some tafsir book of the dua, whichever level you want to go, but at least one section a day. Is that difficult? To read one section of the dua of the Imam who is teaching us what the Prophet, his grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, was sent for. The Prophet is sent for makarim al-akhlaq, li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq, and the Imam is sharing with us a dua in which he describes makarim al-akhlaq. How many of us have read it? My dear brothers and sisters, let us, as you know, they say, it is never too late. Mohira Harakhaz Bigri tells us, it's never too late. Start from today, read one section of the dua today, and make a promise that every day you will read one section, ending with salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, and that's a section by section. Read that, reflect on that, and inshallah we can say eventually that we are followers of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, of Ahlul Bayt, of Imam Amirul Mu'mineen, ultimately of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the opportunity to read their words and follow their words and their wisdom. We ask Him to make us amongst those who listen to what's said and follow what's best. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim.